Zaiba Jabbar is an award-winning director, moving image artist, commissioner, independent curator, and founder of HERVISIONS. She's interested in the democratization and accessibility by how we experience art outside the white cube. Her curatorial project, HERVISIONS, is an investigation into how people in the margins are using technology to create art outside of traditional formats, making space for themselves through the experience of expanded moving image. She is a leader in augmented reality and digital art exhibitions online and offline, working with partners and institutes that include Tate Modern, Lux, Google Arts and Culture, arebyte, bitforms, Furtherfield, the Photographer's Gallery, and most recently, the William Morris Gallery, to name a few. Zaiba was curator in residence at Lux in 2018 and a board member of Abandoned Normal Devices.
Okay. So hi everyone. Thanks for being here. It's really nice to meet you and see you here today. Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. So my name's Zaiba Jabbar, and I'm a curator, and I'm a director and a founder of a project called HERVISIONS. I have put together a selection of my projects, and I've given it this loose title for this presentation, I guess, based on a project that I did a while back called Disembodied Behaviours, and it's about sort of reconfiguring sort of the presence in digital practices. And so just to give you a sort of rundown, I'll be sharing talking a little bit about my sort of background as a director, and then also going into some of my curatorial projects, and then some of my sort of recent work. Some of it is in chronological order and some of it not. So there's a bit of like back and forth, but generally it's in chronological order. So you can see, I guess, the expansion or the way that I've sort of thought about my practice, which I consider sort of expanded moving image. This is me. It's an avatar that someone done very kindly for me. It's an artist called Paolo Pina, actually. So I'm a director, as I mentioned, and I do a project HERVISIONS. I'm actually, I think, a massive introvert, which people find quite strange and surprising, because I love connecting people and I love seeing them grow and I love facilitating opportunities. And in my work, I really thrive with sort of innovative sort of ideas and experimentation and how that can be formed through sort of multidisciplinary practices. I'd call myself a builder, a maker, an outsider, an underdog, and these are all sort of traits that I think are why I'm sort of interested in this democratisation of how we experience art outside of the white cube. And I think these are all things that you'll see sort of translated in the way that I sort of work with new media practices or emerging technologies in my project HERVISIONS. And I think, it's really about these sort of hybrid ways of working, I think, that I'm really fascinated about. And so this was quite strange because it was like going down memory lane a little bit, because these are just a few of the different, I think I made over like 50 moving image, like films, music videos, content, commercial works. And and I was always really drawn to like animation and experimental film. And that really sort of like filtered through into my work as a film director. And then I specialise in, as I said, in sort of music videos and fashion and commercial work. And I was always wanting to blur these lines of like new forms of storytelling. And then I guess I was kind of a little bit of a format rebel as well. And I am really inspired by all of these sort of disciplines intersecting. And actually my sort of earliest memory of art was which was probably you probably wouldn't even call it art, which was probably the most profound, was kind of understanding these ideas of a zoetrope, or the sort of mechanisms of sort of moving image. And so I just wanted to put one of those down there, just to because it was something, and I think this still fuels a lot of my experimentation and methodologies today. And when you're thinking about sort of reconfiguring presences in the digital spaces, and thinking about these post-internet aesthetics, which I was when I was working in film, coming from a sort of graphic design background, because that's what I studied at St Martin's, it was very much about these evolving practices. Yeah, so just to sort of reiterate, I think these were like the traits that really helped me to define these sort of new spaces that I work with in HERVISIONS. And yeah, so I think like through the curatorial project, I love collaborating through HERVISIONS, and I think that's really the core of what I do. And I think utilising different spaces and sort of hybrid ways of working. And then, yeah, as HERVISIONS really started as a grassroots sort of organisation. It's a femme-focused curatorial initiative, I guess. And it really was about finding a space which was bringing a lot of the small screen to the large screen. So it was art or moving image works that I was finding in solitude, actually, often, you know, on through social media, and I was really fascinated by why a lot of that was being made by female identifying artists, non-binary artists, working with new technologies or new open source softwares, free to use softwares that at the time was, you know, kind of felt very sort of profound when I'd come from this sort of typical sort of film industry where creating and experimenting was really not necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially as a woman of colour, you know, working in a really white male dominated industry, the film industry. It was really tricky. So there was like, and look, you know, budget constraints and being able to use like tools, new tools that were coming out that were sort of this digitisation of film and new media art, I guess. So yeah, I think I've really been trying to support and promote marginalised voices that are using these technologies and, you know, making space for themselves in the sort of digital environment. And then, yeah, so I think that really defined a lot of the sort of criticality of the work that I do. And sort of defining these spaces and making space for marginalised voices within these environments, and that's how that works online and offline. I think thinking about this sort of peripatetic storytelling, which, you know, I think for me this sort of critical turning point in those sort of early days was that small screen to large screen sort of expand storytelling or practices. That was, I think, that I was sort of experiencing, which was, you know, kind of fueled by this self-publishing and that people had through social media. So yeah, so this was just like some stills, and I'm just going to sort of talk through a little bit of this project, which has inspired the title of this presentation, which is called Disembodied Behaviours, and it was actually during COVID. It was a collaboration between Bitforms Gallery in New York and New Art City, which is an online platform, and it was about sort of celebrating this sort of potential of digital individuals who could range from avatars imbued with like cultural memory to AI narrators to sort of dismantle predictive structures of power. And so it was a group show. So this is like a curatorial project, a group show with a range of amazing artists which you should all go and have a look at: Julie Beener, Victoria Cribb, Kumbara McCumbee, Lejune Macmillan and Elisa Mercy. And they were all sort of implementing measures of social critique to reject self-fulfilling prophecies and commodified capital applied to populations. And then each of the work presented sort of focused on this refusal of normative behaviours, including conventions of time and space typically applied to human bodies. So this allowed us to engage future landscapes in the digital component of the exhibition, which was what we had online with New Art City. And so that was the virtual presentation, was a 6-site specific multi-user experiences, and it sort of echoed the gallery's screening program, which was in a 3D atmosphere. So we had like these two different sites that were sort of working in tandem. So, you know, the one in the gallery with the moving image presentations, and then also the online environments. Yeah, I think it was really seeking to sort of honour these sort of alternative states of being. And this sort of personification is used as a tool to breathe life into data archives, for example, or abandoned materiality. And the different artworks advance autonomy through the unravelling of these sort of established binaries. And this rejection allows artists to usurp the mechanisms of suppression, fear and conformity, and thereby expanding into landscapes that defy prophetic systems of the status quo. And then, so this is just like a still image from one of the artists, Victoria Cribb, who, yeah, she's a Brazilian artist. I've worked with her a few times, and she addresses the physical body's presence in this film called Elucia, which is, and it's this where you see sort of programming text sprawl across the screen, and we enter this sort of landscape of glossy sort of rendered hues. And then it's really an attempt to rationalise the contemporary body as one that is untethered by form. So she, Cribb cites that the relationships between relationships have become sort of impalpable due to sort of technology as a predominant method of communication, and the artist uses this avatar to represent the separation of self while elucidating that how black bodies are viewed with similar parameters as digital bodies, exploited and reduced like files or software. The work spotlights the importance of projected data in relation to COVID's trajectory, explaining that the pandemic has forced worldwide attention to a curve rather than a straight line, and sinuosity. So it's like this ability to curve or bend easily signals a type of flexibility that is imperative to the exhibition in general, and it's echoed in the next artist's works, in Macmillan's work, where she animates the choreography of a dancer through motion capture, which I'll speak a bit more afterwards. So it's like, I guess, drawing these lines between flexibility and manipulation, and sort of reminds us to, I guess, straighten our posture a little bit. And so, yeah, so these are just some stills from some of the moving image works. I did actually want to try and show you some of the environment, but I thought it might be a bit too complicated with the setup. So, but I do have the link, is still live if anyone afterwards would like to see the virtual exhibition. But so, yeah, so with yeah, so it's really about these sort of like relationships between the body and black bodies, essentially. And then, yeah, so with, we've also got a picture, a clip of Kumbara's work there actually as well, which is a project or film, sorry, called Evo's Turn, which explores where Makumba is questioning our sort of our conceptualization of blackness and its form. And the work explores this sort of uninhibited extraterrestrial terrain accompanied by a sort of monologue performed by Macumbi's voice clone, essentially, called Evo. And within this, Evo questions its own inherent blackness as an avatar created by Macumbi in a way synonymous to an artificial intelligence questioning its own sentence, or better yet, its humanness. So yeah, so in a sense, it's kind of like grappling with its own blackness, and how Evo speaks, it pans across this sort of like nondescript desert cloaked in night. And then sort of generally this, we're looking to think about these sort of mechanisms of suppression, fear and conformity, and thereby expanding these into landscapes that defy prophetic systems of the status quo. And then, yeah, so that's kind of like giving you, actually I should go back to Lajoune's one. So yeah, so she did a lot of, which is, sorry, it's this one on the, don't know. Oh no, I think I've actually missed the. Yeah, so Lajoune McMillan, she's an artist that does a project called the Black Movement Archive, and it's essentially motion captured data of her friends that are dancers that she's then using sort of point cloud data, she's then sort of reappropriated into sort of the movement image artwork. That's also in the online exhibition, the movement image piece, if anyone does want to see the film, because it's quite a long artwork. It's like over 10 minutes and stuff, so just do let me know afterwards. But yeah, and that's a project where she's created a lot of different iterations of that, and then thinking about this dispersed or reconfigured ideas of identity and how that can fit in and around these sort of different spaces. And I think this, again, looking at that sort of nomadic storytelling or peripatetic storytelling of how you can sort of integrate small acts of activism into different like devices and landscapes, I think is really interesting. So yeah, so now I just sort of going a bit sort of onto a slightly more commercial project, which is, I guess, was kind of bringing together more of my sort of directing skills with my curatorial work. So I was approached by an agency to create a moving image piece or artwork that was a collaboration between Instagram and the Saatchi Gallery, and it was for an exhibition which was about their Yours to Make campaign. Was thinking about sort of Gen Z, like fluid sort of identities. And it was also about utilising the different reels that different communities had were sort of existing on sort of social media and on Instagram and stuff. So it was using the reels in Instagram to be able to create some sort of or translate some of these core sort of beliefs and I guess ideas and sort of communities that were existing in Instagram reels. So we ended up sort of looking at they curated a sort of whole selection of reels and different people that different profiles and different sort of communities, and thinking about sort of sort of beauty and nature and technology, and then and the sort of film takes you through this sort of infinity tunnel, depicting sort of these sort of limitless sort of potentials for creative expression, and then you sort of go into this pool of fluidity, which is this like liquid landscape representing sort of these ever-evolving nature of young people, and how that was defining these other sort of like ways of wisdom and self-love and I think self-awareness. And then the Forest of Possibility was kind of thinking about nature and technology and how they merge. And then we sort of like, yeah, so that the viewer was sort of taken into this like film that was all shot and made in Unity. And yeah, it was then displayed in the Zaiba Gallery, and with the Instagram reels displayed. Each of the 50 creators that made their reels were then on phones as well. And I think sort of a lot of the sort of visual style was about sort of blending a lot of these, I guess, like tropes of technology and nature, and thinking about how these sort of lines are sort of blurring and dissolving as well. So that's like another, so this is like the infinity tunnel. So that was quite a fun project. And then this was sort of, I think, it was just like a project actually called Open Space, which was a sort of a year, well, it actually ended up being 18 months. And Nella, was one of the amazing young artists that was involved in the programme too. So it was a whole sort of augmented reality initiative that and a project that I partnered with the Photographer's Gallery, and it was really trying to look at like how augmented reality was being, I guess, newly defined as a sort of artistic expression, a new discipline. So it was, we ended up having 3 commissions, and we had a young arts programme, workshops, and yeah, it was a really successful programme, taking over sort of the online spaces on the Photographer's Gallery website, and then also the Soho Photographic Quarter, in sort of the vicinity of the gallery. And this was just, I wish I could have gone through all of the part of the projects, but this is just one of the commissions that we did, which was with an artist called Joseph Natcham, and the work was called Underground Resistant and Living Memories, and it takes its title from the black militant techno music collective Underground Resistance, and connecting their sort of creative processes of sampling and remixing to sort of Natcham's approach to digital collage and photo montage. The work was it was really striking because it was using these sort of printed photo montages, which acted as digital triggers of different moving 3D objects like tentacles, and then these were causing sort of a meeting of different representations of these iconic figures with sort of historic and online culture. So really kind of blending these sort of and dissolving these sort of worlds. And also thinking about time-based media and how, I guess these sort of the interactive elements, digital aspects were sort of coming out into the sort of offline spaces. And I think this sort of hybrid approach is really, in its purest form, really allows for some of the demystification of complex, untold aspects of history. And it is also a method which I think, a process which combines the sort of both activism and image making and digital practices. So understanding how to introduce these notions of resistance within the cultural industry through these accumulation of signs and symbols. I think both conceptually and thematically, with the tentacles, I think these sort of ideas of which employ techniques and sampling and borrowing from elements, I think I really enjoyed with this project. I think it was really nice to see these connections and circulations. And how this becomes a continuous dialogue and evolving narrative that resists static interpretations. I will try and go through this really quickly now. So this is some of these. A recent this wasn't recent actually, sorry. A project called Out of Touch. I just wanted to just quickly talk about this, which was, it was during COVID, and it was a whole program that I curated when I was at Lux. And it was during COVID-19. It was critically reflecting on the radical shift to digital space as a primary site for cultural production and consumption. And it really included a whole sort of range of commissions, events, discussions, performances, reflecting on the idea of digital and its digital analogues. So it was thinking about digital analogues in the post-touch world, and considering how isolation has accelerated our digital vocabulary and what a meaningful language of touch might be beyond the physical. And this particular project was by an artist called Libby Heaney, and it was a site-specific interactive animation which was activated by the participants' touch. The animation was created by sort of a fragmented image generated by quantum computing, dismantling biases constructed by digital technologies. And it sort of uses this, the performance uses persistent vision, a psychological phenomenon called phi, and reconfiguring and assembling through the action of touch. So I think, these, again, sort of thinking about these mechanisms and how static images are sort of being reconfigured, and how the body is reconfigured as well. So it's actually ended up living as a site-specific durational performance on Instagram stories on Lux's social media account. And you can see how the sort of open pose was used to create the computer vision, but thinking also about sort of how the Western, drawing parallels of computer vision and how it looks at like Western ideas of sort of art history, I guess. So I'll just, we've got a little bit, have I got, how much? Okay, I'll quickly say this. And then another project, which was by this artist called Denise Yap, which is called Secondhand Smoke, was inspired by the mechanisms of birdsong. So Secondhand Smoke sends out love letters, like mellifluously told through tweets. Love incites this sort of auditory reaction in birds and an aesthetic reaction in humans. So while human beings display an innate involuntary emotional reaction such as blushing, birds biologically develop and refine their mating calls during mutation. Through this investigation into sonic communications and expressions of birds, this artist was sort of trying to imagine mating calls made by humans signalling to their future lovers in this project called Secondhand Smoke, and it was ended up being an adaptation from her artworks into a conversation on Twitter, using tweets, I guess, as shout-outs for love, on X now. So that was a project that I really enjoyed commissioning and working with the artists. And then I guess, just thinking about how we can be observed really, and how our avatars and our, and how that is separate to, our sort of physical selves, and then I guess, how you sort of can reconfigure again those presences. And then, and also, I've done a lot of face filter work, which is also sort of coincided with the sort of introduction of Spark AR at the time, which is obviously going to be closing soon. So if anyone's got any ideas about that, I'd love to hear. And again, just sort of correlating or working in tandem with the accessibility of software and technologies, and really thinking how this sort of defines new spaces. And please try some of these while they're still live. And then I'll just go quickly through, this is for Art Night. It was a project about exploring hope through love in the digital age, and what that looks like through the lens of post-colonial animation and digital art. And it was, the artworks were viewed on small sort of installations in internet cafes, technology based hardware shops. It's maybe the right description. And it was, so it was taking over these internet cafes. It's called Fastline, a curatorial project, and it was thinking about this collective consciousness of how we strive for instant gratification through how we mediate online spaces and the extension of ourselves through technology, and how that could be considered to be perceived as an unrequited love at times. And I really wanted to sort of highlight these non-binary and female identifying artists working with post-digital, working in sort of making post-digital art that sort of dismantles the rhetoric by creating work mainly in solitude through their own controlled means. So this empowered sentiment, when using these tools, manifest and generate art, brings hope, I think. So, and that was sort of like the hope then opens the gateway for love and respect, and ties in with the themes that Art Night was exploring at that festival. So that was a lot of work for a one-night pop-up intervention, I have to say. But yeah, a whole host of like amazing artists like Martine Sims, Inez Alpha, Kaken, Eva Parber Margaretti, Victoria Cribb, and Danielle Braithwaite Shirley, so many people. And then the project also was a pop-up at Google headquarters, which sort of extended to this third site, which is a takeover about exploring searching for self, searching for love, and the virtual presence, and how that's fabricated in interfaces and loneliness, and how we navigate those spaces, online spaces, and sort of technology's promise of instant gratification and the extension of ourselves. And there we had like, a whole host of other artists there with this sort of takeover, people like Susanna Pettigrew, Coralie Vogler, and then Pitch also showed something. And then, maybe one last project. And then also, and then this was just a project with the Tate, where we was thinking about temporal realities that exist outside of what can be captured. So capture here is used in its sort of dual meaning, to record or take a picture of something using a camera, as well as to take someone as a prisoner or to take something into your possession, especially by force. So what happens to us when machines capture and surveil us in order to dominate and control us? And how do we protect ourselves and those that we wish to remain unrecognisable? So it kind of, when the user opens the filter, we're met with this reality that morphs the user unrecognisable. So as soon as you hit the button to record yourself, that's what happens. It sort of distorts you. So we're taking away this sort of ability to capture us on Instagram, and then thinking about distorting ourselves in order to protect ourselves from the algorithms that dehumanise and capitalise our bodies, and watch, and watch, you can sort of watch what happens with see how that sort of like translates in the filter demos there. But yeah, and I'll just quickly like just go through, because I don't think I have time to explain all the other projects, but yeah. If anyone has any questions, I guess, but yeah, there's,